Hey, Master Coach G here on Thriving After 50, Mind, Body, Soul. And in this episode, I am continuing the conversation about our emotions. And today I'm talking about the characteristics of emotional challenges. Something I want to talk about in this episode is the intensity of that particular challenge, how long that emotional challenge may last, what triggered the emotional challenge that you're feeling, and the physical sensations that come along with that during an emotional challenge. Also going to be talking about the impact that it makes on our daily lives when we don't manage the emotional challenges that we face on a day-to-day. So we got to learn how to deal with that, and also going to be talking about coping mechanisms. So stay tuned. This is Master Coach G. I'll see you on the inside. Hey, Master Coach G here on Thriving After 50, Mind, Body, Soul. And today I am going to continue our conversation about our emotions. Our emotions definitely affect our physical health. And that is the reason why I think it's important to talk about it. So today's topic is characteristics of emotional challenges. Yep. That's what I like to call it. An emotional challenge. It's like, hold on a second, I'm having an emotional challenging moment. So emotional challenges can vary from person to person because we all feel our own emotions. But here are some common emotional characteristics, some emotional challenges, characteristics that you may be able to identify. I'm not saying all of them, but maybe one or two of these you may be able to identify. The first one is the intensity of the emotional challenge. So often what happens, it involves like feelings that is difficult to manage, like anger. Anger is a emotion that is difficult to manage. Fear, frustration, even sadness. Sometimes those emotions are very difficult to manage, and it depends on the situation, the scenario, the circumstances that will cause us to which gear, if you will, that emotion is in. Like anger is a very, very difficult emotion to manage. However, once we realize that we are dealing with that, then we have to go through certain steps in order to kind of back out of that. The next thing I want to talk about is the duration of the emotional challenge. Now, some emotional challenges can be for a short period of time, and some emotional challenges may persist on and on and on for a longer period of time. But here's the thing, I think when you talk about the duration of the emotional challenge, I think that if we take the steps of the 3 A's, which is the awareness, once we are aware and we've identified the emotional challenge, then we can take accountability for that emotional challenge, and then we can make adjustments. So therefore, that will be a short-lived emotional challenge because we've taken steps to make sure that it don't linger. However, if we don't take those steps, then we can pretty much expect it to linger on a little bit. However, we need to be aware of it. You shouldn't be having, now I know in some cases, it's like grief is an emotion. I know in some cases that can linger on, but if it's something like, somebody didn't speak to you this morning, I mean, really just get over it. That kind of thing. So I'm not speaking of anything that's like, like over the top. I'm not speaking of like an emotional, the emotion grief. I'm not speaking of that. I'm just speaking of something that you should really be able to just kind of let go of. I know some people that are 60, 70, 80 years old, and they're still holding on to things that happened, 50 years ago. It's like, okay, enough already. Seriously, enough. So, I think that we have to learn that and be aware. We have to be aware that our emotional challenges sometimes last longer than they should. And at that point, then we should question ourselves and again, identify the emotional challenge and then become aware of it, so that way you can acknowledge it and then make the adjustments so that you don't be 50 years later in the same place with the same emotion. Okay, cool. Triggers. Emotional challenges can be triggered by specific events or situation or even a memory. Okay. Triggers can vary from person to person, and it also can be related to a past experience or current scenario. And so let me say that again. It can be related to a past experience and or a current scenario. And I like to say and or because it's what people call deja vu. Okay, so it's a past experience that you're experiencing in a current situation. And we call it deja vu. Well, we do in the world, but it's better known as triggers. So you could be somewhere and you say like, oh my God, I lived this before, or I've done this before, and it seemed like you have, but it's, and again, it's what we call deja vu, but it's actually an emotional trigger. So because I experienced, before I knew what an emotional trigger was, I experienced an emotional trigger, and it was like everything that I saw at that time when I experienced the memory, everything that I saw, everything that I was wearing, everything that I touched, everything that I smelled was like, it was just right there. And it was just amazing how the mind can trigger an emotion that will take you all the way back. And I'm sure that, a lot of people have experienced deja vu at least once in their lives. Just to break it down from the trigger thing, deja vu, everyone probably has experienced that once in their life. Here's the next thing that's really important, and the reason why I am talking about our emotions is because we can experience, during an emotional challenging moment, we can manifest physical sensations in our body. Okay? Let me say that again. During an emotional challenging moment, we can manifest physical sensations in our body. Okay? Let me tell you what I mean by that. Your heart could start racing. Your chest can get tight. You can get a headache or even a stomach ache. And these are real live things, and you can go to the doctor or whatever, and they can do tests and they can do all this stuff and they don't find anything wrong with you. But it's because you are having physical sensations through an emotional challenging moment, which is manifesting the physical sensation in your body. So that's why it's important that we identify when we're having an emotional challenging moment, so that we can prevent from having the physical sensations in our body. Because every time, and it may not show up in the signs of a racing heart or tightness in your chest or a headache or a stomach ache. It may show up in other ways, like you may lose your appetite, or you may not sleep at night, or, you don't feel like doing anything. So it may not show up with the other thing, but that's still a physical thing. So that's why we need to be aware of the physical sensations that our body manifests during our emotional challenges, because it's real. It's not a figment of your imagination by any stretch of the imagination. It is not. It is real. And here's the thing about that, is that if that is a habit, if that is something that you do on a daily basis, here's what I can tell you, is that it is definitely making an impact on your daily life. Emotional challenging moments can have a significant impact on a person's daily life. Here are the things that it affects. It affects all of our relationships: spouse, children, work, school, overall well-being, everything. That's why it's important to understand that we cannot continue to stay in an emotional challenging moment. We have to go through the steps on identifying what it is so that we don't continue on, because it can become a habit. It could be one day, next thing you know, it's 3 days later, and you're still in the same emotional state. So that's why it's important, because it can make a significant impact on your daily life. And once your relationship starts to become impacted, your job now is becoming impacted by you having these emotional challenges. You're having outbursts at work, and people looking at you like, oh, what's going on with him? What's going on with her? So that's why it's important that we understand that. And you can't, it's like you can't have all this negative energy every single day. It's just not healthy. That is going to make a huge impact on your relationships, your work, your school performance, and your overall well-being. Because again, it goes back to the physical sensations that your body will feel every single day. And if you go through that every single day, it's a daily routine that you perform poorly because of an emotional challenge. And if it becomes a habit, then it's going to affect everything in your life. So there are some coping mechanisms, which next week I'm going to, because we're going to end this month on the emotional challenges. But I'm going to share more in detail. But there are some coping mechanisms for individuals that may be facing emotional challenges. And we all face them from time to time. Okay, they can vary from person to person, but coping mechanisms are good to help us deal with our emotions. And when I say coping mechanisms, I don't mean like picking up a vice. That's not what I mean when I say coping mechanism. I mean coping mechanisms may include things like seeking support from others, engaging in self-care, getting involved with some type of physical activity, even practicing relaxation techniques. Okay, so during the time years ago, 10, 12 years ago, when I was diagnosed with diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high A1C, I was 237 pounds, and I had acid reflux so bad that I couldn't lay down and sleep. My coping mechanism at that time was walking. That was my coping mechanism. For one, it was the only thing that I knew to do. It was like I was desperate and I needed to get some answers, so I started walking. Now, walking may not be your thing, but you got to get your body moving to some type of physical activity. That's a part of self-care. And you will see that you will feel different. I went from 237 pounds to 120 pounds at the age of 55 when I started the process. Let me just throw that in there too. Age 55. Do you know how hard it is to lose 100 pounds at age 55? It was not an easy task. However, I did accomplish it. But here's the thing. It's important to remember that everybody experiences and copes with emotional challenges differently. Everybody does. But you have to find what works for you. Okay? So if you or someone you know is struggling right now with emotional challenges, it might be helpful to seek, and there's nothing wrong with seeking, support from a professional such as myself, a life coach. I highly recommend that if you are struggling with emotional challenges, and it doesn't matter how significant it may seem to insignificant it may seem to others. If it's significant to you, then I would say, jump on a call. I will put my link in the chat there, and feel free to set up a call. And hey, whatever it is that you're struggling with, if you have an emotional challenge that you just want to overcome, then hey, I'm there for you. So I will put a link there for you to be in touch with me, and we can go ahead and see what the deal is. How about that? Okay, listen, that's what I have for you today. I hope this episode has added value to your life. Thank you for joining me here on Thriving After 50, Mind, Body, Soul. Want to give a shout out to my listeners. Can't end the broadcast without giving a shout out to my listeners. They have been so faithful, and I really do appreciate you. Here in the United States, Canada, Belgium, the UK, Mexico, Federation of Russia, France, Brazil, Ireland, and India. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. If this podcast has been a benefit to you, I want you to subscribe, follow me, and hey, leave a rating for me too. That's really important for us podcasters to see what you think of what it is that we're sharing with you. If there's something else that you want to hear that I'm not talking about as of yet, hey, put it in the chat there. Let me know, and I will be happy to check it out, see what we can do. Okay, that's what I have for you today. I appreciate you. Remember, knowledge applied is power. This is Master Coach G, and I'll see you on the next level.